Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating essay by David Hardwood called Fallen Agape. And let me tell you, it's going to completely flip your understanding of a concept most of us think we have fully figured out. If you've spent any time around theology, you know the word agape. We are always taught it's the highest, ultimate form of love. But Hardwood's deep dive into the source text reveals an anomaly that complicates everything. It turns out this famous word has a dark side.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the widely accepted, highly idealized definition of agape that we're all pretty familiar with. It's typically defined as the pure, unconditional, holy, and sacrificial love of God. It's presented as the kind of love that desires the absolute highest benefit for the person being loved. It's treated as this intrinsically divine, perfect word, and for a long time, Hardwood accepted this definition too, right up until he hit a massive roadblock in the Gospel of John.
Because here is where things get really interesting. In John 3:19, Jesus says, "And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men agaped the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil." Wait, hold on a second. Men agaped the darkness? In the original Greek text, that supposedly divine, perfect word for holy love is used right here to describe fallen humanity's affection for absolute evil.
So this brings us to the central mystery of the essay. How on earth can you sacrificially love darkness? Think about the standard definition we just talked about. Are these people exercising their willpower to unconditionally love darkness for the highest benefit of the darkness? Are they loving darkness with a love that is supposedly unique to God himself? No way. That makes literally zero sense. There is nothing redemptive about how the word is being used here. It's actually a damning indictment of humanity.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how startling the contrast really is. Look at this text comparison. John 3:16, a verse most people know by heart. God agape the world. But just 3 verses later, in John 3:19, culpable men agape the darkness. It is the exact same Greek word. The only difference is the nature of the lover and the object of their love. That's a massive difference in focus, and it completely forces us to ask, what does this word actually mean?
Well, Hardwood's core assertion here is a real game changer. He argues that the text actually reveals agape is an emotion. It's a powerful feeling of intense affection, devotion, and desire. See, Hardwood points out that in the very next verse, John 3:20, the text says that everyone who does evil hates the light. So in verse 19, men agape the darkness, and in verse 20, they hate the light. Agape and hate are placed in direct contrast. Since hate is clearly an intense emotion, its exact counterpart, agape, must also be a deep, powerful emotion, not just some cold, calculated act of the will.
Section 2. Agape for darkness.
So if agape is an intense emotional devotion, why in the world would fallen humanity aim it at the dark? Well, it's a means to an end. Jesus said men agaped the darkness because their deeds were evil. You see, the darkness hides their unfruitful, disgraceful behaviors. This could literally be anything from a hidden party lifestyle to corrupt, self-seeking political maneuvering. People truly agape the anonymity that darkness provides because it gives them a convenient cloak of secrecy. It lets them keep up a nice public appearance of righteousness while they're secretly satisfying their darkest desires.
But when you really think about it, loving darkness makes absolutely no logical sense for a freed person. The biblical text describes this domain of darkness as a system that subjugates, binds, and blinds humanity. It is totally dehumanizing. In stark contrast, believers are rescued and transferred into the kingdom of the Son, which is a place of redemption and forgiveness. Hardwood asks a great question here. Would a freshly freed slave ever love a satanic system that tormented them and tore their family apart? Of course not. We are meant to set our agape on the God who ransomed us. Agapeing darkness is an absolute tragedy.
Moving right along to our next section, loving the world system. Because this misdirected love doesn't just stop at literal darkness. In his first epistle, the Apostle John gives us this stark warning. Do not agape the world nor the things in the world. Now, when he says the world here, he isn't talking about planet Earth or the people on it. He is talking about the human system that's in direct competition with God, a system built entirely on distrusting the Creator and promoting self-centeredness. John is explicitly commanding us not to aim our agape at this malevolent passing system. And the very fact that he has to warn us means we absolutely have the capacity to do it. And John gets very specific about what he means by the things in the world. He breaks down 3 devilish lusts that animate this system. First, there's the lust of the flesh. Those are the cravings for physical gratification. Second, the lust of the eyes.
that strong desire for the superficial and the outward form. And third, the boastful pride of life, just empty haughtiness. John is essentially saying, do not agape the lust of the flesh, do not agape the lust of the eyes. These things are animated by a spirit of rebellion against God, and it is entirely possible for us to misdirect our deepest devotion right toward them.
Let's move to the next section and see how this builds. Serving two masters.
Because there is a very practical, everyday way we misdirect our love, which brings us to the extreme end of fallen agape, materialism, and the snare of wealth. Jesus gave a massive warning about this in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and agape the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." Look really carefully at that phrasing. Jesus says, you will agape the rival master. We'd all agree that agape is perfectly used to describe our love for God, but who would have imagined it can legitimately describe an idolatrous devotion to a rival? It is entirely possible to intensely, devotionally agape money and earthly goods.
And the consequences of aiming your agape at wealth, they're devastating. Harwood traces the Apostle Paul's progression from 1 Timothy to show the snare of mammon. It all starts with simply wanting to get rich. That desire leads directly to falling into temptation and foolish desires, which then causes a person to wander completely away from the faith, and it ends with them piercing themselves with many griefs. The love of money can lead even the most gifted people into total ruin and deep spiritual corruption.
To really drive this home, Harwood compares two tragic biblical figures who misdirected their agape. First, consider Demas. The Apostle Paul wrote that Demas agaped this present world and just deserted him. Demas succumbed to the elementary lusts of the flesh, self-preservation. He loved his own life more than the mission. Now compare him to Balaam, the archetypical false prophet. The text says Balaam agaped the wages of unrighteousness. He literally prostituted heaven's spiritual gifts for earthly profit. Why? Because he deeply, intensely agaped the paycheck. He aimed his highest devotion at the completely wrong thing.
Which brings us to our final section, the true nature of agape.
So, the crucial point is this. Pulling all these investigative threads together, we arrive at Harwood's textually grounded definition. Agape is an emotion based upon the value of the beloved, whose moral nature depends upon the lover and the object. Meaning, agape isn't inherently holy just by being agape. It's like a vessel. If a wicked person agapes a wicked thing, it is a profane, idolatrous, and destructive emotion. But when a holy God agapes you, it is a perfectly pure, redemptive, and glorious emotion. The holiness comes from God, not from the Greek letters agape.
And that brings us to the most beautiful part of this whole explainer. God's holy agape sets us free. We don't have to be trapped in these destructive, lesser loves for the darkness, the world, or for wealth. The text tells us that God's pure, rightly directed love is poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. When we actually believe in and experience His agape for us, it's a healing balm. It delivers us from our bondage and empowers us to take this incredibly powerful emotion and rightly aim it back at God and at the people around us.
I want to end this explainer by leaving you with a provocative thought directly from a quiz at the end of Harwood's essay. Take a look at this question. Demas agaped the present world and deserted Paul. Which of the three worldly lusts does his misdirected agape represent? Is it the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, or the boastful pride of life? Think about that for a second. And more importantly, think about where your own devotion is aimed today. Are you directing this powerful emotion of agape toward the passing things of this world, or are you abiding in the holy agape of God? It completely changes how you read the text, doesn't it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this helps you appreciate the true, holy love of God even more.